From the outside, the Bennetts' private garden looked like a scene out of a bridal magazine. String lights twinkling across oak trees, champagne flutes catching the warm Savannah sun, and guests dressed in pastel linens and pearls. Everything had been planned down to the last hydrangea bloom. This was supposed to be my moment. I, Claire Bennett, age 33, preservation architect, founder of Bennett and Rivera Urban Revival, and newly engaged to Ethan Rivera, was finally celebrating something that felt like mine. Not a win I had to fight tooth and nail for. Just joy. Until my father stepped onto the garden stage and took the microphone. I felt Ethan's hand tighten slightly around mine as Thomas Bennett cleared his throat, his voice booming and practiced like he was opening a courtroom instead of making a toast. Family, friends, esteemed colleagues, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate Claire and Ethan's engagement, he began, smiling. And while we're all gathered, Diane and I wanted to share something very special with you. I felt it, a shift, something just beneath the surface of his words. He continued, "We're proud to announce that the Willowcrest Manor, our family's most treasured legacy, will officially be passed down to our daughter, Haley." The crowd clapped. My mother, Diane, forced a smile. Ethan froze beside me. My glass of champagne trembled in my fingers, but I didn't look down. I looked directly at my father. Cold, sharp, controlled. "Interesting choice of timing, Dad," I said, voice even, right in the middle of my engagement toast. Gasps rippled quietly across the patio, and someone near the bar stopped mid-sip. My younger sister Haley was already stepping up beside our parents, smiling that saccharine, PR-approved smile that made strangers think she was America's sweetheart. She tilted her head and said, "Some of us just understand what family legacy really means." I could have laughed, except it wasn't funny. Haley, corporate attorney, Daddy's golden girl who'd never spent more than a summer at Willowcrest, once joked about turning the historic manor into a luxury micro-wedding venue. She'd laughed as she scrolled through Pinterest. And now she was its heir? I remembered sleeping on that creaky window seat as a kid, sketching new layouts for the estate's crumbling wings in my notebook. My late grandmother had whispered to me once, "When you turn 35, this place will be yours, Claire. I know you'll bring it back to life." I was 2 years away. And now, this. The guests were shifting uncomfortably. Most had heard me speak passionately about Willowcrest at design summits, in architecture journals, even during city planning hearings. They knew. Haley's voice rang out, condescending as ever. "The estate deserves someone who won't tear it down to build some modern monstrosity." I raised an eyebrow. "Right. Because a marble kitchen island and glass elevators screams tradition." That earned a few stifled laughs. My mother gave me a sharp look. My father stepped in, his tone tight. "Claire, you chose your path. You walked away from the family firm. You poured yourself into these projects. We've made our decision." "Little construction projects," I repeated, letting the words hang. "You mean the multi-million-dollar developments that now fund local historical preservation grants?" He didn't answer. I turned to Ethan and gave his hand a squeeze. He nodded, silently asking, "You sure?" I was. "Well," I said, facing the guests, "since everyone's here, maybe it's time I made my own announcement." The room hushed. Even the string quartet at the far end of the lawn stopped mid-song. "Ethan and I won't be moving into our downtown loft as originally planned," I said, lifting my champagne glass. "Instead, we'll be living right next door to Willowcrest, in our new home." My father's face drained of color. "What new home?" "The Magnolia House," I said, smiling. "The one I've spent the last 3 years designing and building, on the land I bought around Willowcrest." "You didn't," my father began. "I did," I interrupted. "While you were busy doubting me, I was acquiring every parcel you let slip through your fingers. Every acre, every permit, every architectural approval." I pulled my phone from my clutch and tapped the screen, showing the renderings on a large monitor Ethan had synced earlier. The crowd leaned in as the images flipped. Sleek, modern, yet soulful design, echoing the arches and woodwork of Willowcrest. Mature oaks untouched, garden paths curved organically, a community space nestled in the heart. "It's called the Bennett Heritage District," I said. "Magnolia House is just the beginning. A cultural project designed to honor Savannah's history while supporting its future. Historical tours, educational outreach, public gardens." "You're using our name?" Haley scoffed. "Our name," I said, still smiling. "The one grandmother believed meant something." Diane sat down abruptly, her composure cracking. Haley stared, jaw tight. Thomas looked furious. "That land was supposed to be mine," he said. "It was," I replied, "until you stopped paying attention." Ethan placed a gentle hand at the small of my back. I stepped away from the stage, still holding my phone high. Flashbulbs popped. Whispers rose around us. "You gave Haley a house," I said, turning back one last time. "I built a legacy." And then I walked away. From the corner of my eye, I saw Haley staring, stunned. I saw my father clench his jaw, calculating. My mother's hands gripped the chair's arms like she might fall, but I didn't stop. Later that night, I stood on the balcony of my downtown office. Below, construction lights gleamed on the nearly finished Magnolia House. Beyond that, Willow Crest sat silent in the moonlight, its once familiar silhouette now a reminder of what I had lost and what I had gained. Ethan brought out 2 glasses of wine, handed me one, and asked, "You okay?" I took a sip. "I'm better than okay," I said. "They finally saw me." He smiled. "Took them long enough." I nodded. "If they had seen me sooner, maybe I wouldn't have built all this." "Sometimes," he said, "being underestimated is the greatest motivation." I looked out at the land I had reclaimed, repurposed, and reshaped. My legacy didn't come with a title deed. It came from vision, from grit, from every no they'd ever thrown my way. This wasn't over, but it had begun. 3 days after the engagement party, the story had gone viral. A local real estate blogger posted a write-up titled, "They gave her sister the estate. She built an empire next door." It caught fire. Within 48 hours, it had been picked up by national outlets. Architectural Digest requested an interview. The City Heritage Committee wanted to collaborate. Even Savannah Today called Claire Bennett a visionary daughter who turned betrayal into brilliance. Haley hated every word of it. "You think this is funny?" she snapped across the table at brunch, her voice sharp enough to slice through the clink of cutlery. Claire barely looked up from her mimosa. "What, the truth? You should have learned by now. It spreads faster than family gossip." They were at the Telfair Bistro, seated with their parents at a private table near the back. Thomas stirred his coffee too hard. Diane glanced at the waiter like she wished she were somewhere, anywhere else. "You hijacked my moment," Haley continued. "That was supposed to be a celebration." Claire set down her drink. "Mine, actually." Thomas finally spoke. "Claire, enough. Haley's right. This has spiraled." Claire leaned back, arms crossed, her voice calm. "It's only spiraling because you're trying to hold on to something that's already moved forward." "We've been approached by investors," Haley said quickly. "One of Dad's clients wants to feature Willowcrest in a commercial series about generational wealth." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Is that before or after the Preservation Office files a violation?" That shut her up. Thomas cleared his throat, his tone shifting into lawyer mode. "Claire, why don't you and I have lunch tomorrow? Just the 2 of us." Claire didn't hesitate. "Sure, but if it's to ask me to dim my light so Haley can shine, don't waste the reservation." Diane inhaled sharply. Haley looked like she might throw her napkin at someone, but Claire simply stood. "I have a district to build. Enjoy your brunch." The next morning, Claire met with the City Heritage Committee at Magnolia House. Ethan had laid out presentation boards, permits, 3D models, and renderings in the open plan library. The sun poured in through massive restored windows, bouncing off the polished pine floors. "I have to say," said Janice Cheng, head of the committee, "we've never seen a private project with this much vision and compliance. It's practically a masterclass." Claire smiled. "We're not just trying to preserve architecture. We're trying to reimagine how communities engage with their history." Janice nodded. "We'd love to explore official district designation. It would grant you access to statewide preservation funds." As they shook hands, Ethan leaned in. "Guess who just won the city?" Meanwhile, across town, Haley stood in the grand foyer of Willow Crest, furious. "What do you mean I can't change the windows?" she snapped at the man holding a clipboard. He wore a blazer embroidered with the Preservation Office seal and looked utterly unbothered. "Ms. Bennett, Willow Crest Manor is on the local historic registry. Any external alterations must go through review." "I just want double-paned glass. The heating bills are insane." "Understood. You can submit for period-appropriate alternatives. It usually takes 6 to 8 weeks for approval." Haley blinked. "You want me to live like it's 1890? The inspector was polite, but firm. "You're the custodian of a landmark. It's a responsibility." As he walked off, Haley pulled out her phone and started furiously texting Diane. Minutes later, she received a simple reply. "Talk to your sister. She's already figured this out." Haley stared at the message, her hand trembling. That evening, Claire hosted a small industry cocktail hour at Magnolia House. Developers, historians, and even 2 city council members mingled on the back terrace. Ethan stood by her side, smiling as she worked the room like a pro. Across the patio, Claire spotted a familiar figure, Mason Langford, a heavyweight real estate investor in Savannah. He raised his glass toward her. "Claire, you're making quite the ripple." "Good ripples, I hope. The kind that turn into waves. Ever think about expanding beyond Savannah?" Claire kept her smile cool. "Let's finish building the roots first." Mason leaned in slightly. "For what it's worth, your sister's inheritance didn't impress me. You? You're the one actually creating value." Across the lawn, Thomas stood stiff, watching the exchange. He'd arrived late and mostly listened, but he'd heard that. Later, as the last guests filtered out, he approached Claire by the fountain. "I remember bringing you here as a kid," he said, nodding at the stonework. "You were obsessed with how water moved." "I still am," Claire said. "Water always finds its way." He sighed. "This district, it's bigger than I thought." "It's always been bigger than just me," Claire replied. Thomas studied her for a long moment. "Would you meet with the board of our foundation next week?" Claire nodded slowly. "Sure, but I'm not asking for approval. I'm offering partnership." He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. That was progress. The following day, Haley called a contractor for a secret renovation, hoping to bypass the system. But the Preservation Office caught wind. 2 days later, she got slapped with a stop work order and a $7,500 fine. "This is insane," she shouted into the phone at Diane. "You need to talk to Claire," her mother said. "She understands how to work with the system, not around it." "I'm not going to beg her." "Then you better start reading zoning codes." By the weekend, news of the stop work order hit the local paper. Claire didn't gloat, but the calls started coming in faster. A prestigious university wanted to partner on historical education programs. A documentary crew requested access for filming the district's development. Ethan read the headlines aloud as they drank wine on the rooftop. "Preservation Princess, the woman turning Savannah's history into its future." Claire laughed. "Sounds like I wear pearls and carry a clipboard." "Well, you do love a good clipboard." 1 week after brunch, Diane dropped by Claire's office unexpectedly. She held a small box. "I found this in your old room," she said, placing it on Claire's desk. "It's your grandmother's preservation journal." Claire opened it, heart tightening at the faded sketches, handwritten notes, and a photo of Willowcrest from 1958. "She believed in you," Diane said softly, "even when we didn't." Claire looked up. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I was wrong. We both were. And I'm sorry." Claire stood and hugged her, the moment quiet but heavy with years of unspoken wounds. Diane pulled back, eyes glassy. "Your father is beginning to see it too. Not just what you built, but how you did it." Claire nodded. "One brick at a time." By Monday, the city confirmed its intention to officially recognize the Bennett Heritage District. A celebration was planned, media invites sent. And in a small cafe downtown, Haley met with a realtor, her eyes tired, her voice low. "I want to know what Willowcrest would sell for, quietly." She didn't know Claire had already heard. She didn't know Claire was waiting. and she didn't know the story was only heating up. The knock on Claire's office door was soft, but unmistakable. She glanced up from the layout sketches spread across her desk, expecting Ethan, or maybe her assistant. It wasn't either. Her father stood in the doorway, adjusting the cuff of his suit like he didn't quite know what to do with his hands. "Thomas Bennett," Claire said dryly, "here in the temple of concrete and vision. To what do I owe the pleasure?" He stepped in cautiously, taking in the exposed brick walls, the models of historic buildings on the glass shelves, and the framed articles praising her design work. "You've done well for yourself," he said. Claire stood. "I know." There was a long pause. "I thought I'd see the place for myself," he added. "We never really looked at what you've built." "No," she agreed. "You didn't." He sat across from her, his hands clasped in front of him like he was preparing for court. "The city's preservation office called me," he started. "They're excited about your work with the Bennett Heritage District. Said you've partnered with local universities." "We've already locked in 3 educational contracts," Claire said, keeping her tone neutral, "plus historical walking tours booked through spring." Thomas nodded, clearly absorbing more than he wanted to admit. "That's impressive." "I told you this wasn't just a construction project." He didn't argue. Instead, he shifted forward. "Listen, Claire, about Haley." "She's not ready," Claire said bluntly. "And deep down, you know that." Thomas didn't deny it. He ran a hand through his graying hair, looking suddenly older. "She's trying. She feels overshadowed. Always has." "I didn't overshadow her," Claire said, her voice tightening. "I outworked her. That's not the same thing." He exhaled, the air in the room heavier now. "Would you be willing to help her?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "She's not asking for help. She's trying to prove something." He didn't respond. Claire stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, overlooking the construction site. Magnolia House gleamed in the sun, elegant and powerful. "I'm not going to fix her mistakes," she said, "but I'll be ready when she realizes she needs help." 2 days later, Ethan entered Claire's office holding a tablet. "She's in trouble," he said. Claire turned. "Haley?" She applied for a line of credit against Willowcrest. Claire sat down slowly. "She's leveraging the estate already?" "And not for preservation," Ethan said. "It looks like she's trying to float cash into a side business, real estate advisory work, probably to compete with you." Claire didn't speak at first. She folded her hands, thinking. "Do nothing," she finally said. "Let her dig. She'll come to us when she's run out of shovels." The media didn't help Haley's situation. A local TV segment aired that weekend, the vision behind Savannah's newest historic district. It featured Claire walking through Magnolia House with Janice Chang and a crew of university students, explaining architectural restoration techniques. Haley watched it from the drawing room at Willowcrest. Her jaw clenched when Claire, on screen, said, "Preservation isn't about freezing the past. It's about evolving it respectfully." Haley turned the volume up. Then came the line that hit like a punch to the gut. "People keep asking why I didn't fight harder for Willowcrest," Claire said. "But the truth is, I never lost it. I simply outgrew it." Haley threw the remote across the room. It bounced off a vintage chaise and hit the floor with a crack. Still seeking attention, Haley planned a Heritage Wine and Design Night at Willowcrest, her attempt to generate buzz and reposition herself as a preservation advocate. She sent out digital invites to influencers, bloggers, and her father's clients. She didn't file for an event permit. She didn't consult the preservation office. She thought she didn't need to until they showed up. 2 officials from the Preservation Enforcement Division arrived halfway through the event, just as Haley was taking selfies beside a faux restored fireplace. "We received a report of unauthorized modifications," the officer said. "I didn't modify anything," Haley snapped, her wine glass trembling. "You removed 2 original shutters last week," the officer replied, "and replaced them with prefab vinyl. That's a violation." The music stopped. Guests murmured. One woman actually filmed the exchange. Within hours, the city issued a stop work order and fined Haley $7,500. Claire read the article the next morning, sipping her coffee while Ethan scrolled through his phone. "You think she'll call?" he asked. Claire didn't look up. Not yet. That afternoon, Diane showed up at Claire's office again. This time, no box. Just tears. She's unraveling, Diane said quietly, and she won't let us help. Claire gestured toward a chair. I warned you. I know, Diane whispered. I know. They sat in silence for a long moment. She's not you, Claire, Diane said finally. She was never meant to be. But we tried to force her into that shape and gave her something she can't handle. Claire's voice was low. You gave her my dream and expected her to love it the same way. I'm sorry, Diane said. Claire reached across the table, took her mother's hand. It's not too late to fix it. Chet. That evening, Claire was hosting a meeting with a new development partner when she got a notification on her phone, a news alert. Willowcrest owner faces fines for historic violations. Is the family legacy at risk? Ethan caught the headline over her shoulder. She's going to break, he said. Claire nodded. Let's hope she does it in time. Later that week, Claire was invited to a networking panel at a historic preservation conference. The topic? Women Reshaping the Urban Past. She stood before a packed room of architects, city planners, students, and journalists. She spoke about resilience, about being dismissed, about the difference between ownership and stewardship. I wasn't handed a legacy, she said. I carved it out of concrete, opposition, and doubt. The applause was thunderous. Back in Savannah, Haley watched the live stream from her study, surrounded by invoices, unopened letters from the preservation office, and a calendar filled with canceled events. Her phone buzzed. A realtor following up on her inquiry from earlier. She didn't answer. The next morning, Claire received a visitor. It was Mason Langford. You ready to go bigger? He asked. Other cities are watching. There's federal funding we can access. Claire leaned against the railing of Magnolia House's front porch. I'll consider it, she said. Once my sister stops trying to sell the house I was born to restore. Mason chuckled. You're a tough one. Not tough, Claire said. Just patient. And as the morning light spilled over the rooftops of the growing Heritage District, Claire knew. This was only the beginning of the shift. Her father had seen it. Her mother had admitted it. The city had embraced it. All that remained was for Haley to surrender to the truth, and that surrender was coming. Claire had known it was coming. She just hadn't expected it to happen on a Wednesday morning. Ethan entered her office with a single word. It's happening. She looked up from the development timeline she was reviewing. How bad? He held out his phone. It was a screenshot of an email intercepted through one of their commercial contacts. Haley had reached out to a private investment group requesting a quiet appraisal and potential sale of Willowcrest Manor. She's trying to sell the house, Ethan said flatly, to a private buyer. Claire exhaled slowly, pressing her fingers to her temples. She didn't even list it? She asked. She's desperate, Ethan replied, probably trying to avoid the public blowback. Claire stood and walked toward the massive windows overlooking the construction site. Willowcrest stood beyond, elegant but neglected. It hurt to see it that way. Call a family meeting, she said. Now. That evening, the Bennetts gathered at Diane and Thomas's home. Neutral ground. Claire arrived first, Ethan by her side. Thomas greeted them with guarded civility. Diane looked anxious. Haley arrived 10 minutes late, eyes bloodshot, carrying herself like someone expecting a firing squad. They sat in the formal dining room, the table ironically set for dinner, though no one touched the food. Claire was the first to speak. So you're selling Willowcrest. Haley flinched. I was exploring options. You weren't supposed to need options, Claire said, voice calm but cutting. You were given everything. Haley looked up, something breaking in her expression. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want this house. I just didn't want to be second place again. A silence fell over the room like a weighted blanket. I thought if I took it, if I made it mine, I'd finally matter. Claire's voice softened. You always mattered, Haley. You just wanted to matter more than me. Tears welled in Haley's eyes. You were always the brilliant one, the one with ideas. I was just good at following rules. I thought that would be enough. Thomas looked down at his hands, shame etched into his features. Diane reached for Haley's hand, but she pulled away. I messed it up, Haley whispered. The taxes, the violations, the fines. It's too much. I can't do it. Claire sat back, watching her sister crumble. Part of her had waited for this moment. Part of her hated how right it felt. Then she spoke. I'll take the estate. Everyone looked up. I'll buy it from you, Claire said, at fair market value minus the violations and liens. Haley blinked. You do that? With conditions, Claire replied. Thomas narrowed his eyes. What kind of conditions? Claire turned to him. You all relinquish any control or claim to the Bennett Heritage District. It becomes fully mine to manage. Diane looked at Thomas, who said nothing. Claire continued. In return, Haley gets a new role, head of community and media relations. She uses her law background and PR skills to help promote the district, events, outreach, press. Haley's lips parted. You want me to work with you? Not with me, Claire said. For the district. For the vision. It's what this place needs, and what you're actually good at. It wasn't cruel. It was the first olive branch Claire had extended in years. Thomas finally spoke. What about the property title? We transfer ownership officially, Claire said. Clean, legal, final. He nodded slowly. And what do you want from us? Claire looked at both parents. Nothing, except to stop holding me back with your outdated definition of legacy. There was a pause. Then Diane said softly, We'll talk to the lawyers tomorrow. The next morning, Claire sat alone in Willowcrest's ballroom, the dusty chandelier above casting scattered light on the hardwood floor. She ran her hand along the old wainscoting, remembering the sketches she'd once made as a child, the dreams too big for the space she'd been given. Ethan entered quietly. How'd it feel? He asked. Like the beginning of the ending, Claire said, and maybe the start of something better. He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. They finally see you. They don't see me, Claire said. They see the results, but it's a start. That afternoon, Thomas invited her to lunch. It was the first time he'd asked in years without an agenda. They sat at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. I was wrong about you, he said, straight to the point. Claire raised an eyebrow. Is that an apology? It's a start. And he paused, then added, You didn't just build something out there, Claire. You built something in here. He tapped his chest. Something lasting. She didn't reply immediately. Then she said, I learned it from someone. A woman who knew a house wasn't a legacy until you filled it with purpose. He nodded slowly. Your grandmother would be proud. Claire smiled. She always was. That evening, Claire met with Diane in the library at Willowcrest. It smelled faintly of old books and lavender, the same as it had when Claire was a child. Diane placed a checkbook on the table and slid it toward her. For the scholarship, she said. Let's name it after your grandmother, for students in preservation and design. Claire stared at the check, then at her mother. You're serious? I am, and I know I don't deserve your trust yet, but I want to help build something real. Claire nodded slowly. Let's make this about more than property. Let's make it about legacy. The next day, the transfer of ownership was finalized. Claire Bennett officially became the sole owner of Willowcrest Manor. She didn't cry. Instead, she walked through every room, noting what could be saved, what could be restored, what could be reimagined. She ended in the ballroom, standing at the exact spot where she used to dance alone in the moonlight as a child. Haley entered behind her, holding a clipboard and a calendar. I've scheduled your keynote for the grand opening, she said, and the Historical Society wants to feature you in their spring journal. Claire turned. You good with this? Haley shrugged. I'd rather be useful than lost. Claire stepped forward, offering a hand. Then let's get to work. Haley shook it. Deal. That night, Claire and Ethan stood on the Magnolia House balcony, sipping wine. Below them, the district glowed. String lights, restored buildings, freshly painted lampposts. The heart of Savannah, reborn. "You did it," Ethan said softly. "We did it," Claire corrected. "But the best part? This is just the beginning." The air buzzed with anticipation. Claire stood at the foot of the newly restored steps of Willowcrest Manor, the crisp white facade gleaming under the spring sun. A string quartet tuned up softly on the side lawn, the delicate notes floating through the garden as guests arrived. Architects, city leaders, reporters, professors, students, even longtime Savannah locals who'd only seen Willowcrest from a distance. Today was different. Today, they were stepping into something alive again. At the center of it all stood Claire, dressed in a navy silk blouse and tailored slacks, hair swept back with quiet elegance. No longer the outsider. No longer the overlooked daughter. She was now the architect of a new era, for her family, for her city, and for the very meaning of legacy. "Claire!" a voice called behind her. She turned to see Haley approaching, clipboard in hand, hair in a low chignon, heels clicking on the stone path. There was a calm to her now, a steadiness Claire hadn't seen before. "The press is set up in the East Garden," Haley said. "Your keynote is in 20 minutes. And the dean from Savannah State is asking if you'll do a guest lecture next semester." Claire blinked. "That's unexpected." Haley smirked. "Get used to it. You're a local icon now." Claire raised a brow. "You sound almost proud." "I am," Haley said, voice softer. "Even if it took me longer to get here." Claire paused. "You're doing great with the outreach." "I'm good at talking," Haley shrugged. "Turns out it helps when I actually believe in what I'm saying." And they shared a quiet moment. No rivalry, no sharp edges, just understanding. "Thanks for not shutting me out," Haley added. Claire nodded. "Thanks for not running away." They turned together as a small group from the preservation board approached. Haley peeled off with grace, guiding them toward the ballroom. Claire took one last look at the house before making her way toward the podium set up under a canopy of magnolia trees. The audience quieted as she stepped up. She adjusted the microphone, took a breath, and spoke. 2 years ago, I stood on the balcony of a half-built house with nothing but blueprints and belief. I'd lost something I thought was mine, but what I didn't know then was that sometimes the dream we're chasing isn't about reclaiming the past, it's about building what comes next. She glanced at Willowcrest behind her, then continued. Willowcrest was my childhood castle, my classroom, my silent promise to a woman who always believed in me, my grandmother. Today, it becomes more than just a family estate. It becomes a home for history, for education, for community. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. "Legacy isn't what we inherit," Claire said. "It's what we choose to preserve, to protect, to pass on." As she stepped back from the mic, Ethan met her at the edge of the crowd. He kissed her cheek and handed her a champagne flute. "You nailed it," he whispered. "Let's hope the Preservation Board agrees. They already do. They just gave you a standing ovation." Inside the ballroom, newly restored with original molding and carefully refinished floors, Claire stood next to Diane and Thomas, who looked around in disbelief. "It's exactly how I remember it," Diane said, voice thick with emotion. Claire nodded. "Down to the chandeliers. I found the blueprints in the city archives." Thomas rested his hand on the oak railing. "You've done something bigger than I ever imagined." Claire turned to him. "You were protecting the past. I was building its future." He smiled. "We want you to manage all the Bennett properties going forward. Develop them the way you've done here." Claire paused. "Under one condition." "Of course," Diane said. "We established the Claire Bennett Foundation for historical preservation, educational outreach, and student grants. We use our family name to fund more than just buildings." Thomas didn't hesitate. "Already drafted. Your mother insisted." Claire smiled. "Good." Later that night, after the guests had gone and the moon hung high over the rooftops of the Heritage District, Claire stepped onto the second-floor balcony of Willowcrest. Below, the garden lights flickered like fireflies. Across the street, Magnolia House stood proud. no longer in competition, but in harmony with its historic counterpart. She heard footsteps behind her. Haley appeared, holding a worn, leather-bound sketchbook. "I found this while moving out," she said. "It's yours." Claire took the notebook in silent awe. The edges were frayed, the pages filled with childhood sketches, floor plans, landscape designs, ballroom restorations. "I thought you'd thrown this out years ago." "I almost did," Haley admitted, "but I read it, and I finally get it." Claire flipped through the pages, pausing at a drawing labeled Future Willow Crest. "Not bad for a 12-year-old, she said. "You didn't just dream it," Haley said. "You built it." Claire looked up, her eyes meeting her sister's. "There's still room to grow." Haley smiled. "I heard the Historical Society is planning a podcast. Think they'd let me host it?" Claire grinned. "With your voice? You were made for it." They stood there for a long time, side by side, two women who had once been adversaries, now united by purpose. Downstairs, Ethan waited with 2 glasses of wine. "The foundation paperwork is in," he said. "And guess what? The state just named the Bennett Heritage District a model for preservation excellence." Claire laughed, taking the glass. "And to think it all started with a betrayal at an engagement party." He raised his glass. "To building something better." They clinked glasses. "To building something lasting," she added. A week later, Claire returned to the ballroom, this time for her grandmother's memorial celebration. The event was elegant and warm, filled with family friends, scholars, former colleagues. In the foyer, a new plaque had been installed, in honor of Eleanor Bennett, who saw the future in the past. After the speeches, Thomas approached Claire, looking genuinely moved. "She would have been proud." "She always was," Claire said, touching the plaque gently. As the last notes of the string quartet played and the sun dipped behind the magnolias, Claire and Ethan walked hand in hand through the district. Every brick, every window, every soft-lit lantern was a reminder. She hadn't just saved a house. She had saved a story and written a new chapter for everyone who would walk through these streets for generations to come. Legacy, she now understood, wasn't about inheritance. It was about intention. And finally, she was home.